talk a little bit about water conservation and why it's so important for our natural resources. Wekiva Springs is second magnitude spring, and you can see that it's a very large permanent pool area here, and the water that comes through the spring and out into feed the Wekiva River and ultimately into the St. Johns River is water that has accumulated on the land and percolated through along with some of the pollutants and things that we put on our yards. And so if we continue to withdraw large amounts of water from our aquifer, the potential to lower this spring level by 50% has been mentioned somewhere in the past. So water conservation is an important element. Even if you don't ever make it to the springs, it's nice to know that they're here and people do enjoy them. So please think about conserving water and try to get it into your life. Thank you. Presentation number 5, Student's Choice. Delivering educational programs in agricultural settings. And today's lesson will be about improving water conservation in your yard and thinking about with a focus on automatic outside irrigation and how to help people reduce their irrigation water. Also, this is a problem-based learning lesson, and we will be looking at the area of water conservation and how difficult it is to get many homeowners to use water properly for irrigating their yard. Use irrigation system. In this lesson, we will be doing a problem-based learning model. In phase 1 of this model, we will review and present the problem, and the problem is saving irrigation water, water conservation in the home, and obstacles and barriers. In phase number 2, we will be devising a strategy and presenting 10 things you can do in your yard to reduce irrigation water, and 3, how to implement the strategy, and we can show how these things can be done in your yard. And phase 4, we will be discussing and evaluating, and there's a few things that you can do to save water in your yard. After you have implemented these strategies into your life, you can move inside of your home and have a focus on conserving water indoors. So the objectives of today's lesson will be to enhance our knowledge of why it is important to use water more wisely in Central Florida, be able to devise and implement at least 2 strategies to save water in your yard, and also be able to build a rain barrel and place it in your yard to offset your watering needs slightly. And this will be a demonstration. The problem in Central Florida, as well as in most parts of the world, a clean and safe water supply is important for the health of people and for our environment. Florida appears to have an abundance of fresh water supply for people to use, but over the past 30 years, population has grown, and so has development. Technology of irrigation has changed as well, and the supply of domestic water is having an impact on our natural resources, causing unacceptable harm. The problem. A clean and safe water supply is important for people as well as for our environment. Florida appears to have ample amounts of water, unacceptable impacts. It has been projected that within the next 30 years by government agencies and local governments that the water supply and demand for urban water will increase as population increases. And it has been projected by the government and water suppliers that the existing supply will not be sufficient enough to meet, and so alternative supplies of water will need to be developed. The projected demands can have significant environmental harm to our land, rivers, lakes, streams, springs, and wetlands. There already has been harm to many of our wetlands, lake levels, and spring flows. Surface water and many lakes and rivers all have recovery and prevention strategies that have been put in place by the water management districts. Florida has historically had years of droughts and floods, and an increased withdrawal from our aquifer will significantly cause economic harm to our way of life. Sinkholes have been happening in Florida throughout history, as many of the lakes are from old sinkholes. However, sinkholes may increase as the withdrawals from our aquifer go beyond safe limits. Even the recent economic slowdown you would think would have slowed down this problem, but today the problem still exists. Using water more wisely and not having to create alternative water supplies will lessen our economic burden to construct and maintain infrastructure for future Floridians and meet the demands of our current inhabitants. Until water conservation recently was not considered a significant strategy by many water managers. A very difficult debate has been going on in our political planning world and about how to get people to be more conservative. Hi, I'm here today at Wekiwa Springs State Park, in the famous home of the Wekiwa Spring. You can see here it's a second magnitude spring, and we have many springs in Florida. We have some close by, Blue Springs, Rock Springs, and water conservation is very important for the watering of your yard. If you use too much groundwater, that it can cause a decline in the spring levels. And it's anticipated in another 30 years or so we may lose 50% of the spring flow from the watershed. And you can see that this spring is a beautiful area and natural. And today in Hydric Hammock. This hammock is a special plant community that's unlike most other plant communities because this one periodically gets flooded, and during the wet season you can see that the water levels rise and flood the area and have specialized plants that can handle the extra water. Then during the drought years, these plants lose the soil, it dries up and it blows away, it decomposes, and the leaf litter builds up some additional soils. Wetlands are very important habitats. They have 5 functions. They are flood protection, nutrient sinks, they provide habitat for wildlife, they provide oxygen, and they are a native habitat for our birds and animals. So wetlands are important. And this is part of the floodplain. And wetlands, when you reduce the groundwater and the superficial aquifer becomes impacted, wetlands lose their hydration because they are usually fed by the surface groundwater as well as fed by the runoff from the upland areas, and then the flooding from the water areas. I've been coming to this area for a long time, and I've seen many changes over the years, the last 30 years that I've been attending Wekiwa Springs State Park. From the changes in water quality, I know a lot more about the water chemistry. I've seen changes in the fish and wildlife, and also seen a lot more of the plants come in, some of the bad plants, invasive plants, and aquatic plants, and algae, and it's just heartbreaking in some respects to me. But water conservation is a big part of protecting all of this, and as well as using the Florida-friendly landscaping principles and making sure that you use the right amount of fertilizers and the proper amount of pesticides to fight your pests in your yards, because everything you do has an impact in our watershed. So now you've heard about the problem and why water conservation is important in your yard. You may not have decided to actually conserve water, but the next step is to make a commitment and decide on how much water you can save potentially in your yard. First off, by knowing how much water you use monthly is very important, because it is reported that up to 50% of all the water used in a household is used outside on the landscape irrigation, used for your landscape. Also, you've heard some of the compelling reasons of why to conserve water will help protect our natural resources. And also, it's just better for your plants. Most plant problems, especially with turf grass, is a lot due to overwatering and overfeeding the diseases that happen. And watering with supplemental water when it's not good for your grass can cause fungus and other diseases. Also, once you decide to make a commitment, then you need to do some more work by getting educated about the different things you're going to. Here are 10 things you can do in your yard that potentially can save a lot of water and make conservation easier for you. First off, you want to make sure that the times in the shade areas versus the full sun areas is different, because plants in the full sun have different water requirements than plants in the shade. Also, you can prepare and do a catch can test to determine how much water you're putting out in that particular zone. You can reduce the overspray areas and make sure that your water hits on target. You can modify your zones by plant groupings and have high flow turfgrass areas and landscape beds on separate zones. You can turn off your automatic system and go to manual and only run it when you determine that there's a need to use supplemental water. You can change your high volume spray heads to multi-trajectory nozzles, and that can reduce water. You can convert your high volume irrigation systems in plant beds to low volume irrigation. You can install soil moisture sensors. You can calibrate your system into delivering that 3/4 inch per 1,000 square foot area in the sun areas. You can also make sure that you have an expanding disc interrupter rain sensor put in on your irrigation system to shut off during rain events. And also, you can make sure that you adhere to the water conservation rules and only water 2 times per week during the growing season and 1 time potentially during the dormant season as necessary. These are some simple ways that you can save water in your yard and have a better landscape. Thanks. Hi, we're here today to look at an irrigation system. This is my zone 3 for my house, and I've got a catch can test here going. And once a month, if you make a commitment to go out and check each zone and check all of your heads to make sure that they're all functioning properly and pointed in the right direction, and the catch can test will let me know if I'm applying the right amount of water. And so what I'm going to do is, after I leave this zone, I'll go to my next zones and I'll make a list of all the activities or things that need to be changed or worked on. Like over there, I know we have some heads that are hitting the house and the structure, and that's not good. And so irrigation is an important component. It wasn't until about 30 years ago that automatic irrigation systems were created. And people before used to have to drag hoses and those sprinklers out and put them out on their yards. So I think people were a lot less concerned about watering and weren't watering. So if you just put your irrigation system onto manual and only water when your grass needs it, is something that you can tell, and follow the watering restrictions for 2 days a week in the growing season and 1 day a week if you need it during that time frame, because usually that's the time when the grass has gone dormant and isn't growing and doesn't need any supplemental irrigation at that time, and the rain should be sufficient. So those are a couple of helpful hints that can help reduce your water usage and make sure that we're getting conservation for irrigation and how you can save water. These little cans here work wonders at doing what's called a catch can test. And as you can see, I have my zone 3 on today, and I have some problems with my irrigation system. I have some overspray, which wastes some water, and I also have mostly coverage. So how I would do this catch can test to determine how much water that I would let out of my irrigation system, how much is a 1/2 inch of water, 3/4 inch, and you can see that this is mostly a full sun area to irrigate, is I will set these cans out in the yard, and then I'll leave these cans out in the yard during this cycle and determine how much water is collected in those cans, and after the time that I have allotted, then I can make adjustments to my time clock to make sure that I get out a 3/4 inch amount of water during that time frame. So Irrigation is a tricky subject. A lot of people have to invest some additional money in because the efficiency of most irrigation systems are less than 30%. As you can see, we have a lot of grass in our neighborhood, and if everyone was to water more than their share or the allotted amount for the water restrictions, we could have some uh, watering issues, and conservation would not be practical. So the first thing you're going to do when you go out to inspect your irrigation system is you're going to go out and you're going to check and make sure that all your heads are sprinkling properly and that they're mostly getting on the projected area that you're trying to hit. So now that you know about the problem and why it's important to conserve water in your yard, we can now devise and implement a strategy for doing that and make it pretty simple. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is make sure that you have your irrigation timer set for the correct days, and you're going to check that, and there's a battery inside the system, and you're going to make sure that you check that yearly. You're also going to do what is called a catch can test to determine the amount of water that you're putting out into your yard. And then from there, you're going to do an audit of your existing irrigation system. So making the decision to reduce water use outside will take you some steps, and perhaps you will have to invest some money. The following activities will take time and you will have to make a commitment. So monthly review of your automatic irrigation system and checking out how much water that you've saved from the previous month will be a way to get some bang for your buck. Rain barrels can be used in your yard to help supplement. Here we have almost 225 gallons of water. You can see it catches off of the rooftop and goes in and overflows. Rainwater harvesting is an excellent way to start water conservation around your home. An average rooftop, depending on the size of your home, this is some rule of thumb, a 1,000 square foot area with a half-inch rain event will collect you over 600 gallons of water. And this is a 55-gallon drum. So you have plenty of water that can be captured, and also if you want to have an overflow and have the water go off into other containers, and depending on how many downspouts you have around your home, it can be a very effective way of watering specialty gardens, potted plants on your back porch. And so the rule about using rainwater harvesting is that you have to capture the water when it rains, and you have to use it between your rain events. And the more that you capture, the more that you use, the more that you can conserve from using from other sources from your home, from your water supply. Today we're going to learn how to build a rain barrel. Rain barrels, as you can see, are great ways to capture water from the downspout from your home and use that water for different things in your yard. You see here I've got the water, and it's actually been raining today, and you can see the water coming out. So there's a couple materials that you're going to need first off, and that's going to be a 55-gallon food grade quality recycled drum, and you can get these in various locations throughout the area. I get them from a container company, and they run around $20 to $25 a piece. And then you're going to get some simple hose bib, a 3/4 inch hose bib, a overflow, a cap, and you're going to get a 48-inch bungee cord, and also some screen that you use on your door, on your windows and such. Well, the first thing you have to do is get your 55-gallon drum, and what you're going to do is you're going to take a reciprocating saw, and you're going to remove the lid from the barrel. And the barrel, you can see, this area has been removed, and you are to take and drill a hole into the top of the barrel, and then you're going to use the saw to remove the lid. And I did this prior to this event. And then you're going to take and you're going to get a 15/16 drill bit, and you're going to drill a hole approximately 6 to 8 inches from the bottom of the barrel, and you're going to insert the hose bib. Prior to putting the hose bib in, you're going to wrap it with some of this plumber's thread seal tape, and that will help to make sure that you have a nice tight seal. And then you'll drill another hole and insert the overflow. And the overflow, you can place a hose onto it. This is a piece of a hose, and you'll be able to direct the overflow water to another area in your yard, so you'll be able to use the water. So you'll put the cap on when you don't have the hose on, and then once you have the top done, you will then put your screen over to prevent mosquitoes from getting into and laying eggs inside, and then you will adhere it with this 48-inch bungee cord. So, in today's lesson, we talked about improving water conservation in your yard outside and using your automated irrigation system more efficiently. The problem we were looking at in this lesson was in the area of water conservation and how difficult it is to get many homeowners to use proper irrigation for their yards. And the objectives for this program was to enhance the public knowledge for why it is important to use water more wisely, to be able to devise and implement at least one strategy to save water in your yard, and be able to build a rain barrel and place that rain barrel in your yard to offset your plant watering slightly. So if you adopt several of these practices that we went over today in your irrigation system or adopting a rain barrel, you can save a lot of water. Well, let's recap Lesson 5, Problem-Based Learning. We today went over water conservation and described the problem. We met our objectives of enhancing your knowledge about the important reasons why we need to conserve water in Central Florida, and now you will be able to devise and implement at least one or more strategies that we discussed today in your yard for water conservation, and you can also are able to build a rain barrel and place it in your yard. There are lots of instructions and YouTube videos that give a more in-depth description of how to build a rain barrel. I hope that you've learned something today, enjoyed the class, and hope that you save water in the future. Thanks.